Alright guys, we're quite a Formula 1 news as we count down to the first test of 2026. Major drama continuing at Ferrari and other teams. Loads of cars we have now seen over the last couple of days, but Ferrari, their engine once again continues to be in the spotlight, in addition to some of the changes they might be making to the design of their chassis for the positive and the negative because of it. We've also got Cadillac, Ferrari powered, and Audi being very critical indeed, it seems, of Mercedes' engine trick that the FIA may need to ban in the coming days, but probably they won't, and it could leave a number of teams at a severe disadvantage. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Apologies for no video yesterday. I was traveling out here to California. Let's just say it's not the most friendly time zone to be a Formula 1 fan, so I do feel for those of you guys out here on the West Coast. But anyway, I will be keeping you guys updated over the coming days. Don't worry about that. Let's talk about the V car because we've seen a lot of cars hit the track over the last couple of days. This is one of the latest, and we finally get some really crisp quality shots of a Formula 1 car hitting the track in 2026. This was at Imola. We have a number of quality images here. I mean, people were at the track. Kim Illman did a couple of nice shots as well. I think one of the key things you'll note about this is, first of all, these cars in this era of regulations look pretty damn good. But also, look at that airbox, and we're going to come back to this when we discuss Ferrari in the coming minutes. That is a seriously sizable hole in that engine cover, effectively, and it raises serious questions on the cooling of the Red Bull powertrain's Ford engine, but also for the other teams as well, and whether Ferrari might have something similar that we shall discuss as well in the coming minutes. Could that be for good or for bad? But this is some of the best shots that we have seen yet. The cars look great in this generation. Of course, there were some edits going around as well to say, well, damn, that's a pretty sizable one. I saw this edit that was pretty funny. Then I saw this one, which took it to an even greater extreme. I don't think that will be quite necessary for the engine, but I guess we'll see. Now, also notable, of course, changes from last year's car to this year's car. This is actually a side-by-side. You can see that the cars are, I don't know, are they a little smaller? They are obviously a little smaller. They look somewhat smaller, but quite substantial, especially when you look at this element at the leading edge of the floor. Very different in terms of the intended in-wash, but whether it really is going to do that, that's a different question. Of course, the front wing is radically different to what we have previously seen. The beam wing as well is effectively gone on this new era. So, a number of changes. Obviously, the side pods look quite radically different as well compared to what they were doing last year. So, some interesting things noted. Probably the more interesting part of this, though, is that last year's car, yeah, obviously it's going to be different. But this year's car is already different to what we saw in the renders. So, what we've seen in that shakedown, some of the images there, we can already see some changes to the design of the front wing, especially some of these little smaller elements that were appearing in the render. They've now changed. They've got these additional new elements that they're putting onto the ends plates of the wings. So look, whether those are new elements, whether those are older elements, who knows what they're really showing us. But the point is that things are changing and will continue to do so on these cars. This another update. In the render, the side pod looked as in the top, and in the real version so far, the car looks as in the bottom. Clearly, there's the part of the inlet of the side pod has changed. There's also this stay at the back of the car, which was not there in the rendered version. But again, even this front element looks to be somewhat different. It might just be a slightly different angle. But yeah, intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. We did, however, get to see a spin. So this is actually an angle of Arvid Lindblad going for a spin. Look, it was wet there in Imola. These cars are very tricky to drive in those conditions anyway, but with the massive torque that they have, it's not like he had a massive crash. You can see, you know, he loses the rear here and he just spins off into the gravel and he gets beached there. They have to recover the car. Not the end of the world. I know people are calling him Arvid Spinblad already, but we'll see about that. The car gets brought back to the garage. So obviously not an ideal day, but given the conditions and the weather conditions around Europe in general right now, probably not a massive surprise. This is the Audi. Now, it's not actually the Audi. This is just a picture of what the livery will look like. It's a little confusing what Audi have done here, in my opinion, because they did a reveal back in November of basically this exact livery. They've then done it again with this exact livery with a few more sponsors. But this is just the show car. There's nothing here that actually is going to be on their real machine. Notably different to what we saw at the shakedown that they did, and there were some long lens camera pictures of back in Barcelona. So a little confusing why Audi haven't shown anything yet. I guess what we can take away is, what do we think about the livery? It's not like the teams are mandated to show us anything, but they're certainly not doing much of that. Is it a good, I'm not massive fan of this livery. It does have a chrome feature, which I don't, which obviously I like historically. People were comparing it to some of these classic McLaren liveries, and I do get that, but I don't think it quite hits the same as like the classic Vodafone McLaren. It maybe hits more similarly to the more recent Chrome McLaren, which was fine, but nothing crazy, I thought, like the cars back in the day. So that's what the Audi is going to look like anyway. That's pretty much all we have on that. The other thing we have is today in Silverstone, this was the Alpine hitting the track for the first time. Again, not ideal conditions for these tests. And of course, they're driving around slowly. They're just checking that things work here. But, as the Alpine goes through Maggots and Beckett's, he's not taking an awful lot of speed here. Now, he would be able to take more speed, presumably, if the car, and if it wasn't wet, and also if he was pushing the car harder. I think the car probably has more performance in it than we have seen there. But they're just doing some reconnaissance running, getting things ready to go. This is probably the first, quality look that we have of the livery that they could well be running on the Alpine, or at least what their car is potentially going to look like. You can see some hints towards the elements of the front part of the floor and what they're doing on the, let's say, end plates of the front wing. So that's the Alpine anyway. So a number of cars spotted over the last few days, but probably most notable is what it means for the next few days, because Ferrari are set to unveil their car in a couple of days' time. Reportedly, we know it's going to be Friday, reportedly it will be 11 a.m. Central Time. They will unveil whatever the Ferrari is going to look like. Is it going to look like this? Much more black and, white and red, really. Is that going to be the solution? Do we still have the HP logos in the blue? Actually, quite possibly yes, because there was this image that was noted, which is a pretty cool image, and it appears to be, obviously it's Charles Leclerc, having a seat fitting done, it appears, in what can be imagined to be the new Ferrari. Now, what you can first of all tell, probably the halo isn't going to look like this, they're going to paint it, whatever. But the car is painted, and the car is red, obviously, it's a Ferrari, but it's a shiny red, it's a glossy red. It's not a matte finished red. You can see the reflection of Charles Leclerc's helmet visor in that red of the Ferrari, and that, it appears, is what De Kester was getting at. So you guys might remember the other day, De Kester said that there's some pleasant surprise that he's happy with on the new livery, and people thought that might be, oh, the HP logo is no longer blue, it's going to be black or white or something, and it's going to make the livery less ugly. But De Kester then says, no, that was effectively the novelty that he liked. And that's pretty much what his answer is, that it's going to be glossy, and he's happy with that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's not going to be a blue HP logo plastered somewhere, right? So that's kind of the current situation. But we'll see what the car looks like when it comes out. I'm sure it's going to look pretty spectacular, to be honest, with these cars looking good, the Ferrari and the reds. I'm looking forward to that Ferrari reveal. But unfortunately, we're not going to see it properly for quite some time. Yes, they're going to do their own show day, as Ferrari usually do at Fiorano. They're going to drive a few laps. Hopefully the car works. It'd be pretty embarrassing if it doesn't. But then we go to the test. So the Barcelona test begins in just a few days. It's the start of next week. On the 26th of January, the test gets underway. It's a 5-day test. They can only do running on 3 of those days. Ferrari have already decided what days they're going to run on. We'll discuss that in a second. But rumour has it, according to Eric Van Haren, and I believe this now may have been confirmed, that the second test in Bahrain is not being fully broadcast either. So this is a key talking point in the community. Why do they not want to broadcast these tests? The race said that this is, at least for the Bahrain test, or the Barcelona test, sorry, before we get to Bahrain, the Barcelona test is because the teams don't want it to be broadcast because it could be embarrassing, effectively. But it's team-led, not necessarily sport-led. But then again, the sport, they can do what they want. If they want to broadcast this, they can. But the teams don't want it broadcast. There's nothing for them to gain. There's only embarrassment to be gained. But obviously, from the sports perspective, there will be tons of rumours and theories emerging behind the scenes on what's happening out there in Barcelona, what teams are getting cooked, what teams aren't, and all this. And there will be some fake news, there will be some real news, but because there's no broadcast, it's going to be difficult to tell what's actually real and what's fake, because some of the images that we are going to see of these cars, are they going to be real? Are they going to be AI generated, right? Like all these type of things that will, I'm sure, do the rounds, but it's not going to be broadcast publicly. And okay, for Barcelona, I kind of get that, because it's like, all right, whatever. It's a shakedown. It's a 5-day test, but only 3 of them will they be running on. So I understand not really doing much media coverage at all for that. Maybe even don't broadcast it. That's what they've elected to do. But the first real test, I mean, to be honest, the first test is Barcelona, obviously. But F1 are saying, no, that's just a shakedown. Bahrain is the first proper test. But for the first test, as they're calling it, in Bahrain, 11th through the 13th of February, there's still no broadcast. Well, there is, but only for the last hour. So that's what has been confirmed today, at least unless anything changes, that only the final hour of Bahrain testing, the first one, will be broadcast. The rest of the day, there will be no broadcasting. So, yeah, a little bit confusing. Only the final test, where presumably things will be better, right? Like people will be up and running, hopefully, and the engines, they should have got on top of them to a certain extent. That's when they're going to broadcast it. So I think it shows pretty clearly what they're going for here, right? They want to control the narrative and try not to ensure there's much negativity around, because they're only going to properly broadcast when things should be at their absolute best. But I'm sure there are going to be some stories emerging behind the scenes regardless. Now, Ferrari in Barcelona are set to run on the Tuesday to the Thursday. That's their plan. Leclerc is going to start in the morning on the Tuesday, Hamilton in the afternoon, then Hamilton Wednesday morning, Leclerc Wednesday afternoon, then Leclerc Thursday morning, Hamilton Thursday afternoon. That's the current plan. But, of course, as I say, they can only choose 3 of the 5 days. The weather might get in the way. They might have to change their plans. That is Ferrari's current strategy. They're ready to debut their car in a couple of days' time at Fiorano on the 23rd. They were in the simulator, putting in work. I think there was a little video here as well of Hamilton. Yeah, here he is. So, got a Ferrari driving out. Hamilton's in the back, taking some selfies. And, well, not intentionally taking some selfies, but this guy's taking a selfie video with him. And you can see Hamilton with the thumbs up. And you can even see there he does pop a grin, right? So, big grin on Hamilton's face. People are saying, oh, he's happy, he's excited, like this is going to be our year. But yeah, we'll see, right? Ferrari always optimistic. Now, they're not set to confirm the replacement for Riccardo Adami quite yet. We know that it's been confirmed now a few days ago. Riccardo Adami will no longer be Lewis Hamilton's race engineer. I think that's probably a sensible decision, all things considered. But Brian Bozzi, so he's the new man for Charles Leclerc. Xavi Marcos was the old we are checking man. Brian Bozzi's the new man. It looks like they have a better relationship. And for now, he will be supporting both. So during their extended shakedown with the team's single SF26, Brian will be on the radio in both occasions. So not yet clear who the new race engineer of Hamilton is going to be. There were some rumours the other day, but they are not set to announce that imminently. Now, let's talk about the more technical stuff. What's actually going to happen on the track? Because, I mean, even from this angle, you can see just how large that air inbox is. So the question is, why? Why is the Red Bull powertrain's powered racing bull having such a huge intake compared to what we seem like we've seen elsewhere? The Cadillac seems pretty large as well. On the Ferrari engine, but nothing massive exactly. But De Kester says that this oversized hood section will also be oversized on the Ferrari. The problem is not so much the engine itself or the fuels, but the high and prolonged revs to recharge the ERS as quickly as possible. So I thought that was very interesting. Cooling this year in theory should be better, at least from one level of theory, because you've got a less powerful combustion engine, the electrical part is more efficient. But actually, because the electrical part, yeah, it might be efficient in terms of the heat generation that it outputs compared to the amount of power it can deliver to the wheels, but it's not very efficient when it comes to, it's a thirsty beast, basically. It's a thirsty beast, and the recharge is the big challenge this year. We understand that there is energy recovery on the rear axle, but not on the front axle, because one team, maybe or may not be Mercedes, was not very happy with that. So it's a big challenge to get the batteries charged and keep them charged and make that you can actually deploy the energy. So the roundabout way of coming up with an answer here is that the engine will have to do more work. The combustion engine will have to do more work. And that's the major kind of implication from today, is that actually, no, because we see these oversized intakes, and we're going to see it on other teams as well. And yeah, if you're a customer team, you probably have to do this just to be on the safe side. The works teams have an advantage in that sense, but it's quite plausible that we see to an extent across the board larger air intakes, given the fact that the engine's going to be running all the time. When you're through a corner, you may need, as is being described here by De Kester, and there's been talk about this recently, as you're going through a slow corner, or let's say even a medium speed corner, I don't know, instead of maybe taking it in fourth like you might usually, you might instead want to take it in second and have a huge amount of revs, more than would be optimal in normal conditions. But actually you want those revs because you can use those revs to recharge the battery. So I'm not saying it's going to be that extreme, but the point still stands, right? That actually very high and prolonged revs, like you might take a corner usually in sixth, but actually now you're going to take it in fifth and use those extra revs to recharge. Again, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the ICE. It's going to put a lot of pressure on the cooling of the car as well. And that's why we get to this pretty hilarious predicament where we're trying to be fully sustainable, but in so doing, we're revving the combustion engine. I know that's on sustainable fuels, but we're revving it harder than we would otherwise be to compensate for what is effectively a lackluster set of regulations. Now, this means, because the ICE is very important, that's the takeaway of this development, especially now that we have seen these oversized intakes. It's like, okay, yeah, the cooling of the engine is going to be important because the engine is running very hard. And that means that the ICE, well, yes, it's 45% of the overall power output, it's more important than that, basically. It's more important because the more powerful the ICE gets, the more powerful your battery gets as well, effectively. So it's a very important component. Now, this is where Cadillac come into the matter. They have Ferrari power for now, and Graham Loudon, their top man, says, the engine is fully legal. We know that Ferrari have completely followed the rules on the engine. That gives us a lot of confidence, which is a very interesting thing to say, right? Because yes, your engine is legal, well done, everything is meant to be legal. But actually a lot of fans, certainly Ferrari fans, will hear this and say, hang on a second, that gives me the opposite of a lot of confidence. If your engine is fully legal, okay, yeah, you're not going to get disqualified, but like, it's a standard, right? What are you expecting? To get disqualified every race because of a faulty engine or like an illegal engine? No, like you're not going to get disqualified on that matter. Maybe Mercedes will, we'll talk in a second. But he's confident because they followed the rules. It's like, well, yeah, but don't you want your manufacturer to be pushing the boundaries a little bit, right? Like a little grey area would be nice. And that's all the drama lately about this compression ratio trick. Mercedes are using a higher compression ratio than others because there's a trickery and a grey area in the rules. And Audi, they are the most vehemently opposed to this. They say that we will not accept any... If Mercedes are allowed to do what they're going to do, we're not going to accept it. The FIA will make the right decisions, they hope, he says. We also get this reportedly from, effectively, people associated with Binotto and the situation at Audi. So a source reveals that the compression ratio increase, we're talking a couple of percentage points in terms of power output of the actual engine itself. That could be an extra 13 horsepower, that could be an extra 0.3 a lap, but it's more than that. Because if you can increase the compression ratio, you can go up to 6 to 7% of the ICE power. That has more impact, therefore, on the electrical side as well. And Binotto says, we all have the skills to do it, but it's not allowed. The FIA must be able to check it in real time. So Binotto is very adamant about this. But it's not so clear, because Ben Hodgkinson says, from the Red Bull perspective, who apparently they're doing the same thing, maybe not to quite the extent of Mercedes, but they're doing the same thing. I'm confident what we are doing is legal. Any engineer that doesn't understand about thermal expansion doesn't deserve to be in the sport, doesn't deserve to be an engineer, really. So, I mean, look, Ben Hodgkinson could not be making it any clearer that Red Bull and Mercedes, and maybe others at some point, who knows, are using thermal expansion to try and gain an advantage of compression ratio. You've then got Binotto, who says adamantly, we all can do that. So, Ben Hodgkinson is kind of saying, well, if they didn't think about it, or if they can't do it, then they're just bad engineers, right? Whereas Binotto's saying, no, we could do it if we wanted to, but we don't interpret the rules in that way. But clearly somebody else has. And if anyone's talking the most about it, it is this Ben Hodgkinson guy at Red Bull who's literally said it now. Every other team has been kind of like, oh, well, yeah, maybe. And now he says, well, yeah, if you're not using thermal expansion to your advantage, you're a fraud. And he says, I'm confident what we're doing is legal. The FIA need to make a call on this. Apparently there's a big meeting taking place tomorrow when this will be discussed. Whether a decision is made, that's a very different question. But yeah, the drama continues. What does it mean for Ferrari? Good question. They're not using this trick as far as we understand. They've got that big intake. not exactly positive news, but look, if the car hits the track in Fiorano and it runs effectively, then it's not exactly over yet. There is a little rumour that Mercedes might hit the track tomorrow, actually, because Williams did this, they've done it before. They've got this shakedown livery that they've unveiled as well. Maybe they're going to unveil their car. We might get to see a first glimpse of a Mercedes. I guess we'll see. Just one final thing. Thought you guys might find this interesting. There's some reporting on the Aston Martin. The Aston Martin, as we understand, is probably somewhat behind the curve. It's overweight. It's the decisions about its concept were made as late as possible by Adrian Newey. They're probably going to be quite behind initially, not maybe massively behind, but certainly not optimal, probably. However, the car is reportedly radical, and I'm incredibly excited to see what this Aston Martin looks like, what ideas Newey and the team have come up with. They say, Soy Motors say, I think it's a Spanish outlet, they say it's a radical car, radical in both aero and other elements, a very special car. Things have been seen which haven't been seen in other teams. So, look, whether that's going to be enough and what the Honda engine's going to be like, that's one of the other key concerns. But apparently, under Adrian Newey's oversight, they have been putting in a shift. They've been doing rotating 60-hour week shifts in the team. And apparently some employees just haven't been able to cope with the level of pressure, the level of scrutiny, the level of execution required by Newey and his team. And as a result, they've been relocated, right, to different departments to do other things because they can't handle the heat. So, yeah, thought it was pretty mega to imagine what's going on at that Aston Martin factory. They are all guns blazing, that's for sure. But as I say, there are so many components that are going to make them a successful team this season. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.